So happy to have you along once again. We are joined as always by Greg Engert, Beer Director for the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, a Food and Wine Sommelier of the Year. The group includes Where We Are, Church Key, Birch and Barley is downstairs. Good to see you. What's on tap this week?
So this week I thought it fitting to feature a beer from Evil Twin Brewing. As this coming Monday we're going to be doing a beer dinner with Evil Twin and a draft feature up here at Church Key. So it's something that Jeppe, who is the Evil Twin, Jeppe Jarnit Bjergso, and I have been working on for literally about 6 months. We've been throwing this back and forth. His scheduling is difficult, and I'll explain why in a moment, but we pinned it down, so we're really excited to have him here, especially because one of our first beer dinners we ever did at Birch and Barley downstairs was with Mikael, who happens to be the twin brother of Jeppe. So Mikael and Jeppe Bjergso are twins. Mikael, a gypsy brewer, as is Jeppe, and that's why scheduling can be so difficult with Jeppe. They're both originally from Copenhagen in Denmark, and they travel the world as gypsy brewers. They don't actually have their own breweries, but they travel the world renting space from existing breweries to brew small batches of really amazing flavor-forward beers. I do run into Jeppe more and more nowadays because he actually relocated himself and his entire family from Copenhagen to Williamsburg in Brooklyn, in New York City. So he's actually most of the time stateside now, but his kind of touring keeps him on the road for a lot of the year. Evil Twin is a really cool story, actually, because Jeppe and Mikael were both school teachers in Copenhagen. In 1997, Jeppe started a beer kind of tasting club, which seems obvious today, but back in '97 it was definitely ahead of its time, especially in a market like Copenhagen and the Danish market that was completely dominated by Carlsberg. So kind of not exactly happy with the selection there. He started organizing these tastings where they would bring in beers that they had collected and really started talking about craft beer more generally. And this led to him opening one of the most famous bottle shops in the world that he still owns and operates, called Old Butikken in Copenhagen, the Ale Boutique, I guess, in Danish. And so then about 3 years later, the next thing he did, which is really cool, is he started actually importing and distributing craft beer in Denmark, and then finally jumped in on the Gypsy Brewing Act, much like his brother had before him. So Evil Twin is his kind of fitting name, and he makes a ton of really cool beers. So many different styles, in fact, that it's almost better to look for Evil Twin beers than it is to look for a particular one, because it may be hard to find that specific one again for another 6 months, just because he's always making something new. And he's brewing at 10 different breweries throughout the world right now. Stateside, most of his beers are produced at Westbrook down in South Carolina, which is really great because it's cut down on the cost of some of his beers. Rather than all of them being brewed in Europe and then having to get exported here, that obviously makes them more expensive. He's kind of rebrewed some beers down there that have made them much more affordable.
Is anyone not happy with cheaper beer?
Yeah, exactly. And it could be the same exact beer, it's just more affordable and oftentimes fresher, which is important, especially for some of his lower ABV and hoppier beers, which he makes lots of. So this one actually travels well, and that's a good thing because it's from Amma Bryghus on the island of Amma in Copenhagen, in Denmark. That's one of the breweries that makes his beers. It's called Without You I'm Nothing. And one thing about Amma that's really fascinating is that it's a brewery now, but originally it was built, I think, as a fallout shelter way back in like the 1950s. And then it was converted to a book depository and a depository for Danish language Bibles. So some people have claimed it's like the safest brewery in the world for a number of reasons. Or it's haunted, exactly. So that's Amma makes awesome beers as well. So if you see Amma beers, it's spelled A-M-A-G-E-R, but pronounced Amma. Check them out as well. Okay. Without You I'm Nothing is great. It is a sour ale, through and through. You can tell by looking at the color here. It's got a kind of a tawny amber, a little bit of a brownish note. You would loosely place this into the Belgian category of Flemish red ales or oud bruins, which are really kind of the same idea of sour red brown ales. Some are browner, show a little bit more of a nutty, almost cocoa-ish quality. Some are more red in color, and they're a little bit more fruit-driven. I feel like this one's right in between.
That familiar nose, but not overpowering.
And it's a balanced acidity. It starts off like it's going to get really tart, and then the malt sweetness kind of balances out a little bit, but it's very long in its finish.
That is delicious.
It's very good.
Would that not be a good one to start with if you're a little leery about sour beer?
Yes.
Don't be put off by what it says on the label. That's really...
it's actually pretty balanced.
Yeah.
And I think the cool thing about this is that in the nose, there's lots of really intense fruit qualities. You get a lot of like sour cherry, some sweet like Bing cherry as well, almost a peachy note, red grape quality. But then, and it almost has a sort of a vinegarish quality in the nose, a touch of it, almost acetic. But then on the palate, there is no vinegar there, which is good because we try to steer away from vinegarish qualities in sour ales. And it's definitely not there. A little bit touch of it in the nose, but nothing on the palate. You get a little bit of a kind of a coffee-ish quality, a little nuttiness to balance as well. But altogether, it's around 6.5% alcohol, so it's also not supremely overwhelming. But like you said, Brennan, I think it's great for people who are getting into wild sour beers.
Really good. Last week we were raving on about the cool collaboration movement that's well underway in the craft beer industry, but these gypsy brewers are very cool too. I don't think we've highlighted a lot of them. Stillwater comes to mind.
Stillwater's a big one. Keller's the other huge one, and then Evil Twin probably the next one down.
And it just speaks to the cool open-mindedness of brewers that they're going to let you come in and
exactly.
I assume that maybe you rent the space or some of the equipment, but it's just. Sure, come on in, make some beer. And if people didn't do it, then we'd all be deprived
right,
of stuff
exactly.
like this.
And the other great point about that, though, is that these are gypsy brewers are collaborators every time. I mean, it's definitely not Evil Twin and Ama's Without You I'm Nothing. It's definitely an Evil Twin beer, but Yepa would be the first one to admit that he is always collaborating. Like when he wants a beer, he's not he didn't go to brewing school per se, you know what I mean? So he definitely goes into these breweries and says, this is what I'm looking for. These are the flavors I'm trying to establish in the beer. I was thinking we'd do it this way, but then he's obviously open to the input of the brewers themselves, who of course know their systems better, right. They know what their ingredients they have on hand, and they all end up being collaborative kind of in any event. And then I should also mention about gypsy brewing is that it's not that, and this is to take nothing away from it, it's not that he doesn't brew anything himself, but he's certainly not going back to Ama every single time he has a batch of this made. I think early on they kind of brew and rebrew, and he's involved a lot just to get it where it wants to be. But then after that, it becomes a sort of contract brewing situation where he can kind of call in an order to Ama, and based on their availability, they can reproduce this beer for him without hands-on collaboration.
What would you pair this with?
Well, this goes great with a lot of different things. And one of the things that's very cool about tart beers, especially when they're balanced, is they remind me so much of like salad dressings. When you think about, not that I think they're a little bit more complex than that, and they're obviously not as...
They're better.
They're much better. And for many reasons.
I think I know what you mean.
But you know what I mean? Yeah, they can jump in a little bit more and help out. So they're great as kind of sauces in general. So if you're thinking about just a really hearty kind of bitter arugula salad to start, this is going to bring in your vinaigrette, so to speak. But also it's great to kind of sauce any form of dark meat. Lamb chops and this would be absolutely amazing together. That's something that I would immediately think of.
Okay, we've got a question from Earl Holman, a Beer of the Week regular viewer, and Earl is wondering if he's traveling around the United States, and obviously I'm sure the list you would give us is long, too long for the time we have, but 2 or 3 breweries, craft brewers not to miss, who don't distribute here, who you really just can't get their beer except closer to where they are. What comes to mind for you on that?
Well, really quickly, immediately coming to mind are a number. Obviously, Russian River Brewing Company in Santa Rosa, California, Northern California. Great proximity to San Francisco in Sonoma County, so it's in wine country as well. So that's a can't miss. You go in there too, and it's great. It's like this. It's this little pizza joint and brew pub. They make some of the most amazing beers in the entire world, and they have a great sampler.
17 beers.
It's great, and you can really taste them all. And they just make wonderful stuff there. So that's a no miss. In California as well, if you're in Southern California, in San Diego area, head inland about an hour to Alpine Brewing Company, which we talked about on Beer of the Week a while back because they did a great collaboration with New Belgium. They did that Super IPA. I think you just picked up a little bit more of that. Yeah. And so Alpine's great, especially for really hoppy beers. Pure hoppiness is an amazing beer. On the East Coast, head to Vermont. This isn't just because I went to Middlebury College, Vermont, so I have a warm place in my heart for Vermont in general, but some of the beers they make up there are insane. They're amazing. Sean Hill has Hill Farmstead. It is just, again, some of the most amazing beers in the world. He's got great Belgian styles, great hoppy beers, great sours, great Saison Farmhouse ales. Nearby is Lawson's Finest Liquids. They make wonderful beers also. And then last but not least, I'd be remiss without mentioning my friends down in Tampa Bay, Florida, Cigar City Brewing Company, which is the brewery with whom Blue Jacket first collaborated on our first ever beer.
Okay, excellent. I learned some stuff there to put on my list too. I think
Awesome.
I've been to one out of those 4, so I've got 3 to go to. Thank you very much, Earl, for that question. If you've got a question for Greg, the email is beeroftheweek@WTOP.com. I'm also going to put our Twitter handles up here. Following Church Key DC is a great way to find out about all these cool events they have coming up, because some of them are a little bit last minute.
Yes, they can be.
So, and you can find out immediately about that sort of cool stuff going on here. Greg, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Everyone, please always do drink responsibly, and be sure to bring your thirst next time for another Beer of the Week.